welcome to Discernment Now. My name is Rich Van Every. This is Kevin Anthony, and we have a special feature for you today, getting into the viral theory debate, which is heating up, let me tell you, and creating some waves within the freedom movement. So we're going to break it down for you and get into the cognitive dissonance that is unavoidable when tackling such a big issue as, do viruses even exist, Kevin? And if they do, are they causing disease? And if they do they have anything to do with what we've been faced with the last 3 years especially?
Yeah, I would say that not only is this debate heating up outside in the freedom movement, it heats up between you and I quite regularly, like it did earlier today on our mountain bike ride. So, I don't know where you really want to start with that, but...
Well, I feel with the fact that right now what we have is a scenario in which, there are people within the freedom community, namely Del Bigtree from the High Wire, amongst others, that seem to not even want to engage in the debate or conversation of, is the viral or virology a completely fraudulent science? Is this really the domino that would knock down the narrative by which all the lockdown and masks and everything was based on versus, wow, no, we all have a role to play and we're all moving towards a goal to stop the cabal from taking our power, taking our freedom away from us. And, so what is it that you think is important for us to really get out of this debate? And how can we perhaps create some neutrality here or tone down the infighting?
Let's start with the debate first, and then let's talk about the implications of the debate.
So sounds good.
So what we're really talking about here is the difference between terrain theory and viral theory.
Right.
Terrain theory simply means that it's not viruses that attack you that are the problem. It's that the conditions inside your body, in your terrain, are what allow or dictate whether or not you get sick. So if you have toxic conditions in your terrain, then you end up getting sick. If you have strong, healthy conditions within your terrain, then you don't get sick, regardless of what viruses might or might not be present.
Yeah, internal and external terrain.
Well, but mostly when we're talking terrain theory, we're talking your body as the terrain. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can talk about what's outside, but we don't have really control over that. What we do have control over is within our own body. So, and then there's the viral theory that states that it doesn't matter what the terrain in your body is, that certain viruses, if you get exposed to them, are going to attack you, especially if you get exposed in a large enough way. Now, both of those were valid theories, and they were very, very much debated early on. Mm-hmm. The viral theory became the dominant theory, but remember, we still call it the viral theory, not the viral fact. Mm-hmm. And in later years, Pasteur was known to say that he believed that actually he was probably wrong, and that the terrain theory was probably the more likely correct solution. However, modern science has decided that viral theory is their thing. Well, why? There's lots of reasons for that, because if it's a virus, then you can create vaccines against viruses and things like that. So you can make a lot of money if you're invested in the viral theory. But here's the problem, and this is the problem I have. This is where you and I get into a big debate on this all the time. Because you're like, no, I've been listening to these doctors, and man, they've got this evidence, and viruses surely don't exist. And I go, okay, all right, I'm willing to entertain that idea. But if they don't exist, then how do you explain that I'm perfectly healthy, and a friend comes over and, didn't know they were sick, calls me the next day and says, hey, sorry, I'm sick, and then I end up sick. Now, you could say, oh, well, it's because you knew. But sometimes what happens is, someone comes over, you don't know they're sick, right? You wake up the next day, you're sick. You're like, what the fuck? How did I just get sick, right?
Yeah.
And then you talk to your friend later on, and they go, oh, yeah, sorry, I didn't realize I was sick. My kid had it a couple days ago, but I felt fine. And you don't find that out till afterwards. So you can't blame it on the placebo effect at that point.
Right.
So there has to be something going on.
Right.
And so this is where when I hear one side saying it's absolutely viral, and then we know that's not true, because if you have a strong, healthy immune system, if you boost your vitamin C and vitamin D levels and your zinc and your magnesium and all that, your chances of getting sick are significantly reduced.
Right.
So right there, that shows us that terrain has at least something to do with it. Right.
Yeah.
But then there's this whole thing about, hey, you sometimes are around people who are sick and you don't even know it, and you end up getting sick, which means there's obviously something going on there that's being transmitted from one person to another. Yeah. What that thing is, we don't necessarily know.
Right. And this is one of the big arguments, is like, if you can't explain the contagion factor, then it must be viruses, because that's what we've been told for 100 years or so, even longer. So, but really, we don't fully understand how contagion might work, and this is what's punctuated in John Cowan's book, Contagion.
See, here's
Myth.
the thing: if you understand how they supposedly isolate viruses, you realize that they never actually isolate anything, right? So usually what they do is they take a cell line, and then they contaminate it with a bunch of chemicals.
Right.
And then they expose it to this thing that is supposedly this virus, and then they see what the effect on the cells are. And if it has a detrimental effect on the cells and some of the cells die or become diseased or whatever, they go, see, there you go.
Right.
The virus caused that. Well, wait a minute. What about the toxic chemicals? There's a chemical that they use. They often use like liver cells when they're doing these things. And one of the chemicals that they introduce into this mixture that they make when they're trying to figure this out is known to be toxic to liver cells.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's just like, well, wait a minute. You put like 15 things in there, at least one of which is known to be toxic to the cell line that you're conducting this experiment with. And now you're going to tell me that, oh, it's the virus that did it?
Yeah.
Right? So the point is they can't tell anything from that. And I have not heard of or seen, now I'm not a scientific expert on this, but I have not seen anybody present to me, okay, that's how some people do it, but there's another method that's better. Every time I read about how they do this, it's the same basic method, which is very obviously faulty. So, they're not telling you, we found it, here's the thing, right?
Right.
They're telling you, we put a bunch of stuff together and we saw an effect, so therefore we believe there is a thing.
Right.
Because there's something had an effect, so there must be a thing.
Right.
But they don't actually know the thing.
Yeah. So along with what is considered the viral theory is the germ theory. It's the same sort of thing, is that there is a particle, a contagion that is being transmitted human to human. And this has been the story by which so much fear has been implemented into our lives and our culture to control us. So if they break this theory or this narrative, they feel the whole set of dominoes is going to fall. Other people disagree, that it's okay as long as people are, in a sense, willing to debate, willing to have a conversation about this, which is where people like Del Bigtree have come up on the high wire and said, no, the cognitive dissonance is too big. The general public can't handle the conversation. There might be some truth to that.
I agree with Del on that one. So now we're getting into what are the implications of the debate. So we've kind of laid out what the debate is. The people that believe that there are indeed viruses out there, and then the people who believe, no, these viruses don't really exist and there's something else going on, right? Now, the problem is that both of those camps are both on the freedom side, right? In other words, they're both supposedly on the same side, fighting against things like lockdowns and masks and vaccines and all of that. So what happens is you end up with this infighting. And what I see, and this is the disturbing part to me, is you have people within the freedom movement calling out other people within the freedom movement and bashing them. For instance, giving Del Bigtree a hard time about not going into the depth of this idea of do viruses actually exist?
Like he's hiding something or holding back purposely.
Now, here's the thing is, people like Del or others are going on their shows and doing the best they can to present facts to people. Now, it's important for them to be seen as credible. Like, hey, I'm giving you the facts. I'm not just dealing in conspiracy theories, right?
Right.
Well, what if they don't have enough information to really be able to present this in a credible fashion. What happens? They lose their reputation. People go, oh, he's just another one of those crank conspiracy theorists, right? So from my point of view, when I look at this terrain theory versus viral theory and all this stuff, I mean, granted, it's not my job to spend all day studying this stuff. And if I went out and got all the best books by all the best people, I'd probably have a much better idea. But the point is it's still confusing to me, and I'm not sure that science even knows the answer. So can I go on my program and tell you this is absolutely the way that it is? No, I can't do that. So if I'm going to do a fact-based show, right, I can't go and tell you this is the thing. I can't show up and tell you viruses don't exist, because I don't really know that. So that's where I give people like Del a pass, right?
I think that's valid, because that's a worthy discernment when we have people like Sam Bailey and Andrew Kaufman. You know, these are incredible doctors that are speaking out, and they're very passionate about this subject, and they should be. But perhaps it's getting taken a little too far when they're attacking people that are unwilling or unable to have that conversation or speak out about it as well.
Right. So
they can focus on it, right? But when we start having divide within a larger movement is where the problem lies.
And that is exactly the problem. So, you know, by the way, just an aside, you know, when Del says the public is not ready for that conversation, I agree with him. I totally agree with him. The public,
it's a lot of cognitive dissonance.
Most of the public is not even ready to hear that masks don't work. Think about that. Dozens of studies. The last one published in one of the most prestigious medical databases in the world, which was a meta-study of 78 previous studies that clearly show masks don't work. And we're sitting at lunch today, and what do I watch? I watch somebody walk into that restaurant with a mask on.
Yeah.
Now, with all of that information freely available, hardcore scientific studies published in prestigious medical databases, and people are not ready to accept that masks don't work. Now, imagine what's going to happen if you tell them viruses don't exist and they've been lied to their entire lives.
Yeah.
Do you think they're going to be able to have that conversation? Right. So I agree with Del. I think the majority of people can't have that conversation. Does that mean we shouldn't have the conversation? No, we should. But I can see from Del's point of view how he's like, look, this audience isn't ready for it, and it's only going to hurt his credibility anyway. So he's like, that's not where I'm going to focus my time.
That's fine. But why did he get seemingly so threatened that he then drew this like false association that would be letting Fauci off the hook if we were to...
I don't know anything about that.
Okay, so basically he said, you know, these people are so hung up on this viral theory thing, like, and if we accepted that as true, then people like Fauci would just be let off the hook. They wouldn't, no accountability for them, and we're about ready to indict this person, which indicting somebody doesn't really mean any accountability is going to be held. And unfortunately,
so assuming that what you're paraphrasing is correct, what he's saying is, if we were to say there was no such thing as a virus, we couldn't then charge him for manufacturing one in a lab and releasing it on the people. That's a valid point.
Yeah.
That is a valid point.
And I think there's a distinction between what, you know, the flawed science of virology is, because there is a scientific method that is meant to function and work, and then there's virology, which is almost the opposite of the scientific method. It is a broken, fraudulent...
Well, most of science from is what broken I understand. And fraudulent, but that's
there are then also poisons that are implemented into our air, water, and food, and through injections that are causing great harm, also known as bioweapons. So that's a separate thing. I think they're really, just because people associate COVID as a virus, it's like, no, actually COVID is, to me, a set of symptoms that came from some sort of toxicity.
It's possible. It is possible that there isn't a COVID-19 virus, but something was causing people to get ill. Now, we know that the death toll numbers and all that stuff was manufactured. That we know. But something was causing people to get ill, and not just in the winter. People were getting ill in times of the year where they don't normally get ill. So something was going on. What it is, we don't necessarily know. But here's the point, and this is what we were talking about earlier today, which is at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter when it comes to this subject of infighting amongst the freedom community, because it doesn't matter if it's a virus or if it's a bacteria or if it's a frequency wave from HARP or what it is. What matters is there are evil people trying to do this, and there are people trying to figure out what it is and expose it. And so I personally would prefer not to see doctors or people like Dell or others going after each other and saying, no, he's all wrong, or no, why won't he talk about that, right? The doctors who want to pursue viral theory and see if they can prove or disprove it, great. You go work on that, because we need people to work on that.
I agree.
Those of you who want to focus more on, the day-to-day and the lockdowns and the masks and the vaccines and the harm that's happening, great. You focus on that. But don't you over here yell at you over here because you're not focusing on what I want to focus on, right? Well, and vice versa.
Yeah, well, the criticism has been, because Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is included in this group, Del Bigtree, and who else? Someone else who's really been at the forefront of this movement. And so they feel it's their responsibility to at least debate or address the issue, which they don't seem willing to do. And I think you brought up a great point to why. So, we've transcended that. Now we can see, wow, there's this infighting. And so now how do we hopefully settle those waters so that we aren't dividing amongst a common goal? And what is that common goal?
We have to see the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is freedom. The bigger picture is taking down the cabal who is constantly trying to destroy us.
Yeah, and dividing us. And with manipulative, infiltrators and the like. Which
they're over there laughing at all of this infighting. And it's like, look, we need all hands on deck, and everybody has their part to play. So I don't expect Dell to know everything. I don't expect the other doctors to know everything. I don't expect Robert F. Kennedy to know everything. They've got their part that they're working on, and they are doing their part. And here's another thing too. Just because these people are all prominent, and just because they have a high level of knowledge in one particular area, does not mean that they have a high level of knowledge in every area.
And they're not immune to cognitive dissonance.
Well, that too,
but it's a very real thing.
We've talked about this many times, and to use one example, I've seen many people start to wake up about, factory farming processes, right? And then they make decisions about, hey, I realize that this is not good for me to eat this food that comes from this system, right? But then you see them, okay, I'm not going to stop eating this factory farm food, but then they're eating this processed junk food over here. And to somebody, you might go, they're obviously lying. They have an agenda. They just don't want that because, look, they're over here doing this. No, it just means that they haven't figured out the whole picture yet. They figured out one piece of it. And that piece was, hey, I don't want to be responsible for the torture of animals in factory farms. Okay, great. But you still haven't figured out that over here, this processed food loaded with chemicals and glyphosate and hydrogenated oils and, processed dairy products that come from that very same factory farm that you're telling me you're not going to support by not eating their meat, right? It's the same, but you haven't figured that out yet, right?
Yeah.
And so when we look at some of these people in the freedom movement, does it mean that they've figured out all the pieces and how they all fit together? No, because honestly, nobody has. Right? So just because this person over here is not talking about some piece that you figured out over here does not necessarily mean that they have an agenda and they refuse to do it and they're lying to you or anything like that. Now,
which I've been guilty of because I am such a skeptic now. And and I think being an optimist is a good thing. Being a pessimist is kind of a good thing. And being a realist is the most important thing. But having a mix of all of them is a certain level of discernment.
Having said that, we know for sure that there are infiltrators in the movement. And there are people who are controlled opposition. And there are people whose whole job is to create division within the movement, to cast suspicion and doubt on all of the other people. We know that exists. So this show is Discernment Now. The idea is to use your discernment to try your best to figure out who are the people who genuinely want to share the piece of information that they have figured out, and who are the people who are deliberately trying to lead you in the wrong direction. It's not an easy thing to do. Nobody's perfect at it, and everybody makes mistakes, but fighting amongst each other is not going to help.
Yeah, this is really important. I hope everyone really continues to have this conversation in their life. I mean, this has certainly been one of the more kind of devices contentious issues, I feel, that has come into, my forefront lately. And I feel that, there should be a healthy debate about it. Absolutely. It has a big component which could, over time, knock some dominoes down and open up some new doors of realizing, because let's just talk about the terrain theory a little bit more, because I've been a big advocate and, bringing awareness around frequencies, 4G and 5G specifically. And that's part of the terrain theory model, right? Whereas back from when the Spanish flu happened, there were radio waves,
that were just introduced.
So this is the first way I learned from Cowan, that there was this wave of disease that kind of infiltrated when radio waves even were implemented. We are frequency beings. We're very sensitive to this sort of thing, and we do adapt. So
this is a possibility, and external factors such as high frequency radiation can potentially affect
or low frequency
our terrain. Well, just frequencies in general, but more specifically higher frequencies. So that absolutely is a possibility. But the thing is I don't think we have enough research to know exactly how and how much.
Right.
We know it's not good for us.
Yeah.
We know it can have an effect on us.
Sure.
But I think we need a lot more data on exactly how, where, when, what, all the questions that we might potentially have.
And with that data, we're really looking to independent researchers. We're not able to bank on these major studies that, people in the past have been like, oh, well, show me the studies. I'm like, the studies that are funded by...
That's because the cell phone companies did the studies on whether or not cell phone radiation was bad for you. And amazing, they found it wasn't. Shocking. And even though many others have found that it is actually quite harmful to you. So, but there's
a lot to unpack in all that, but that's one piece of it. Obviously, what's been getting sprayed globally in our atmosphere to offset climate change, apparently with aluminum particles, many other elements, including these lipid nanoparticles that are wrapped in a hydrogel, which are potentially these exosomes, which in a sense would function like a virus and can even have a timed capsule release of their payload to give somebody a sudden death experience or trigger a reaction.
These things are possible, but honestly, I have not seen definitive proof that this is actually happening. We know the technology exists. You can buy lipid everything these days, and all that really means is they take the thing, they encapsulate it in a capsule of fat, basically a fat molecule that's easily absorbed into the body so it can deliver whatever it is. So you can go get lipid vitamin C and it gets absorbed.
So you would want to see it happen to a friend in front of you.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Or see video evidence of somebody. Because that seems like kind of a far stretch.
What I'm saying is, look, if we're going to have a debate about this, we can't just be flinging theories all over the place with no scientific anything behind it, right?
Right. But science is not science anymore, right?
Well,
so we've got a conundrum there where we have to, this is where the discernment comes in to say, oh, there's credible science in the industry, and then there's our own ability to try and connect dots and see.
Science is not that big. It's not that hard.
But in the terrain theory model, that's what I'm saying. We have multiple factors in which we are being poisoned, and that is going to most likely create a stress on the system, which is going to lower the immune system.
Yeah, but we don't know that's the problem, right? So we need more research on this stuff, and it's not hard to do. If you do research, right, you should document exactly everything you did. Then you should be able to hand that documentation off to a completely other team, and they should be able to recreate what you did and get the same results. It's not that difficult.
But it takes funding, which doesn't exist unless they want to control the outcome, which is generally not going to be in anything that it reveals that it's not viruses.
It is a waste of our time and energy to keep having these debates back and forth if we're not doing the science to prove one way or another. Otherwise, we're just going to argue back and forth all day long. Mm-hmm. It's terrain. No, it's viral. It's this. So it's that. It's a poison.
So it's crowdfunding science through independent researchers is basically where we need to go.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
But I mean, not every researcher out there is corrupt. A lot of them are.
Well, anyone that gets grants, anyone that gets proper funding to do
I wouldn't say anyone.
Blind studies.
I wouldn't say anyone.
99%.
I wouldn't say
90-something%.
I don't know that I would go that far either. Trust me, I have little faith in any.
Well, what about
this
Lancet journalist that you mentioned earlier that said if truly it was they would have to redact 90-something% of their articles in a prestigious medical journal.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact quote, but it was a former editor of one of the top medical journals who said that after his years of being the editor, that he believed they would have to retract the majority of the studies because it was fraudulent science. And I tend to agree with him, but I'm not going to label every single scientist who does research as a fraud and corrupt. There are good people out there, but a lot of the times what happens is
they're in a broken system.
Either they don't get the funding because nobody's going to make any money off of it, right? So they don't get the funding. Or when they do find things through research that don't fit the narrative, it's quickly buried. But I mean, look at the masks is a perfect example. We have dozens of studies, long predating COVID.
Oh yeah, there were 40 years of studies that were scrubbed from the internet.
Yeah, I mean, it's all there, but yet does anybody?
A lot of it's gone.
Does anybody hear about it? Right?
Yeah.
Well, right. So this is what happens. So, there's a tendency to say that they're all corrupt and nobody's doing any good science. No, there are some people doing some good science.
That's true.
But if it goes against the narrative, then it just gets buried.
Yeah.
I mean, Dr. Judy Mikovits's story is another perfect example of that. Fauci tried to bury her paper.
Yeah.
She stole it, took it out of NIH, and went to prison for it. Right?
Yeah. So I think, part of what we wanted to get at here is to give people benefit of the doubt to some degree in your, critical mind and perspective on who are the good guys and who are the potentially bad guys, and how to move forward in the information you share and promote, kind of, really better understanding what we're dealing with and what a wicked kind of psyop conundrum that this all is. It's really not for the faint of heart or the weak-minded individual. This is for somebody who can really exercise critical thinking, discernment, and, connect dots over time.
Yeah, and part of the point of this is to show that, in some cases, the data is there and you just have to go look at the data and have to have an open mind. But in some cases, the data isn't there yet. Right. And so for us to have these arguments or debates or infighting amongst each other on topics where the data just isn't really quite there yet, it's just ridiculous. Right. And, the thing is, too, you got to see the bigger picture.
Yeah.
Right. We all need to be on the same team because the enemy that we're fighting is big, well-funded, very powerful, and extremely evil. Right? So we cannot allow ourselves to be divided. We can figure that other stuff out later once we win the main war. Right? But right now we need to stick together.
I believe that is true. And I think that to add to that point is that so much we see seems to be sloppy behavior, sloppy work of how they are attempting to persuade and manipulate and deceive. Yet it's not to be mistaken with the fact that there's a very sophisticated approach in some respects also happening here that is highly intelligent and very manipulative and deceptive. So don't think that what we're dealing with here is anything to just, scrub off. I mean, this is really something that I think is going to hopefully draw us all closer to God, because that is really one of the only ultimate solutions here in facing such a wicked asymmetrical information war that we are in today. And as the increase of AI and other technologies comes in, it might be very difficult in the near future to discern what is an actual video.
It already is.
And what is not.
It already is.
It's going to get worse, though.
It is going to get more difficult for sure. So your discernment skills needs to be really sharp.
Yeah, and that's why we're practicing now, and we really enjoy you being involved in the conversation. So please leave any comments or suggestions that you'd like to have us address in the future, and let's together try and find a way to move through this wicked, amazing time to be alive. And with that, have a beautiful rest of your week. Thanks for watching.